This is Rick Green with today's Constitutional Minute. All right, this will be part 4 in our short series on quarantines and the Constitution. In the midst of this unbelievable government intervention, we've been trying to tackle these constitutional issues that are raised by quarantines and other government orders that you're seeing right now across the nation. When we started our first video, we answered the question, who has the power, states or feds, local governments? And of course, answered that question with the fact that the feds have very little power here. It's almost all left to the states and local governments, which it should be. The second video addressed how far governments can go. In the third video, we talked about what criteria was necessary for government to do these things. And I had planned for today's Constitutional Minute to answer that last question of where. Where do you go for due process? And we covered a little bit of that in the second video, but I want to go deeper into that, but I'm going to have to put that one off because it is imperative, indeed urgent, to come back to our second video, how far can government go? Because right now, friends, we have governors and local officials acting more like they are using the Chinese Communist Party rules than the American Constitution or their own state constitution. Instead of targeting their actions at the disease itself and those that are most vulnerable and stopping the spread, they have managed to set their sights on the American free enterprise system. They are destroying, completely decimating the entire economic engine of our nation. It cannot continue. It must not continue. We must stop the insanity before these czar wannabes plunge our nation into years of depression and darkness. Now, you might say, but Rick, look, just last week you put out a video saying quarantines are constitutional. State governments have almost unlimited power to use them. Why are you changing your tune? Well, first of all, I'm not changing my tune at all, but we are going to have to explain the sheet music in more detail, if you will. In other words, we're going to have to go back to what we said could be done, maybe even what should be done, and compare that to what's actually being done right now, at least with a lot of these governors across the country. So let's take a look at this. I mean, first of all, what did we say in the previous videos? We said that in the event of a communicable disease spreading, local and state government could do what? We said they could isolate those with the disease. We said they could quarantine those who might have it or be spreading it. We said they could close public gatherings such as conventions or theaters, bars, restaurants, and even churches. And we said that they can encourage and should encourage people, if you could work from home, to do so. What we never said they could do, and what we as a nation have never allowed for, is a complete wholesale lockdown of entire counties and states. In fact, about a third of the nation now is calling for this and doing this. And we're talking about lockdowns where no one can go to work. Well, except who they say is essential. Well, who gets to decide what's essential and what's not essential? I mean, first of all, why are we stopping healthy people from going to jobs where simple common sense could keep them healthy? You see, look, the whole lunacy of this complete lockdown of all non-essential businesses begins to show up when you simply go down the food chain, if you will, of how the economy even works, which is part of the problem. These governors that are calling for this have no idea how an economy works because they've never had real jobs, most of them, in their life. But who decides what's essential and what's not essential? I mean, what about gun stores? We have, moronic government officials closing down gun stores while at the same time, in the same breath, releasing criminals because the virus has shown up in some of these prisons. And even while police forces, such as Detroit, have fewer officers due to the coronavirus. Detroit has 331 officers in quarantine as of this recording that I'm doing today. 2 of them have already died. So to my friends in the crime-infested city of Detroit, your streets are even less safe today than they were before. And you're in more need of being able to defend yourself than ever before. But states from California to New York have ordered by government fiat that gun stores have to be closed because they're non-essential. Even my favorite place on the planet, Frontsight Firearms Training Institute in Nevada, has been ordered by the Nevada governor to close. It's insane, absolutely insane. Now look, if the disease is spreading and it's killing people, and if you have the data to prove who is in danger and what will actually stop it, then of course It makes sense to stop the partying, stop the optional social gathering and entertainment. But you don't stop life itself. You don't kill the entire economy. I got a friend, former state rep also here in Texas, Matt Rinaldi. And he just wrote this piece a couple days ago, and it's perfect. And he said, this is like burning down the entire house to stop a termite infestation. In other words, we're killing the patient to save them, and we're doing it even if we don't know whether or not they even had a disease they needed to be saved from. But Rick, wait, we save lives. It's all about saving lives. This will save lives, and this is the only way to do it. Really? How did you come to that conclusion that this is the only way to save those lives? That's the vital question of the moment. In fact, let me come back to that question, because first I got to say how happy I am that these leftist governors, the same ones that are using these draconian, melodramatic sledgehammer instead of a scalpel tactics, how happy I am to hear that they have suddenly become so pro-life. I mean, it's wonderful. These politicians that push for killing babies right up until birth, indeed some of them are okay with legislation that allows you to kill the baby after birth, these same people are suddenly willing to destroy our entire economy if it'll save just one life. I mean, I'm just glad to see such a. In fact, here's the Democrats' new savior. If you haven't noticed, Cuomo, Governor Cuomo of New York. They're even talking about having him somehow through a broker convention become their nominee. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see that happen. But here's what he said. And by the way, thanks to Scarlett Lanny, one of our Constitution coaches, super Constitution coach, for sending me this. He said this. This is in the Business Insider. He said, we're not going to, quote, we're not going to accept a premise that human life is disposable. I agree with that. He went on to say, we're not going to put a dollar figure on human life. We're going to fight every way we can to save every life that we can, because, this is what he said, that's what I think it means to be an American. Wow, I mean, epiphany moment here, folks. That's amazing. I'm sure Governor Cuomo will be joining President Trump at the March for Life next year in D.C. if we're even able to have a gathering in public by that time. But I'm so glad to see him become suddenly pro-life when he's supported partial birth abortion as governor there. Let's not get into the argument of how many lives it takes to be worth a complete destruction of the economy, because it's a ridiculous argument. You don't have to destroy the economy to stop the virus. We have never, ever thought that was the right way to deal with a pandemic. Even in 1918, the worst one that we can look back on, the Spanish flu killed 50 million people worldwide, 700,000 in the U.S. Even then, we didn't even consider, nobody talked about such crazy things as completely locking down entire states, or some are calling on the president to do this with the whole nation, which would be unconstitutional. But we never even talked about the idea of locking down entire states for an indefinite period of time. Even in the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 and 1919, even then, in the big cities where it was spreading fast, they closed theaters and bars and even churches. They canceled big public gatherings, but nobody used a shelter-in-place order. In fact, where did this shelter-in-place? You've heard the phrase. I mean, I was wondering this when this all started last week, and governors started ordering these things. What is shelter-in-place? That doesn't sound like it belongs in this context. Shelter-in-place is for an active shooter situation, or a tornado that's 10 minutes away, or a bomb threat. Things that last 15 minutes, maybe even 15 hours. But you can't do shelter in place for 6 to 18 months. I mean, these crazy people are talking about this. You can't even do a shelter in place for everyone for 2 weeks without having massive, massive destruction to families, businesses, entire communities and states. And what's worse is these left-leaning states that are doing this, even if the more thinking states don't go down that road, we're going to have to bail them out. They'll use the federal government to do that. So it's bad for everyone. But for some insane reason, it started with a couple of these left-wing governors who decided to use this, scalpel of a tool, shelter in place, which is usually for, a few minutes or maybe a few hours, and take that scalpel and turn it into this destructive sledgehammer. And after they did it, I think it was Washington maybe that was the first one to do it in a few counties there, and then Governor Newsom in California, and then after a couple of them did it, then all the other governors decided, oh, wait a minute, if I really care, if I got to look like I'm proving that I'm doing something too. So they jumped on the bandwagon. This bandwagon's going to crash and burn, and it's the citizens, you and me, we're the ones that are going to be hurt by this, not them. Now, thankfully, some governors have refused to be that foolish. You say, but Rick, wait a minute, what are you talking about? The stimulus, it's going to save us. Really? I mean, where does that $2 trillion come from? And what exactly is it going to accomplish? I mean, this is what Milton Friedman called helicopter money, and they're going to shovel it out almost indiscriminately in the hopes that it'll stop the panic, that it'll jolt the psyche of the American buying public back out of panic mode. And that might help. It might help if they let people go to work. I mean, what good is a stimulus if no one can go to work to make and sell things that people need and want to buy with their stimulus money? What good is a business loan if you can't open for business? How in the world is a business supposed to pay people to stay at home and not work? Did you see what the Democrats wanted to do with all that? I mean, all the requirements, they you force you into minimum wage, force you into sick leave, unlimited paid leave, and so it's just it cannot, it will not work for a free economy. All right, look, I'm sorry for showing my frustration. I honestly, I was doing fine when they closed the theaters, even though I really wanted to see the movie I Still Believe about Jeremy Camp. But I really didn't want to eat my popcorn next to somebody, or on the same row as some guy coughing from coronavirus, so I probably wouldn't have gone anyway. But I was okay with them saying, don't go to theaters. I was fine when they closed the schools because, frankly, I think more people should try homeschooling anyway. But I was even okay with all of my speaking engagements being canceled, even though the financial hardship on my family and our employees is going to be huge. I mean, that's the real deal. I could live with that because, come on, we're all willing to sacrifice to save lives, and those steps are logical. They make sense. We've used those steps throughout history, and they've worked. I'm not fine, and neither should you be, with these shelter-in-place orders forcing everyone to stay home. So let's get back to the rational, reasonable, constitutional, yet truly life-altering formula that we started with 2 weeks ago, that the president recommended. Number one, absolutely, quarantine yourself. If you're sick, use some common sense. If you're not feeling good, you may think you might not have the coronavirus, but don't go to work if that's the case and give it to somebody else, or go out and spread it at H-E-B or your grocery store, wherever you live. So that's number one, quarantine yourself if you are sick. Number two, even if you aren't sick, but you can stay home, stay home. That's what we're doing. We're working from home. We're in a kind of situation where we can do that for a little while. But especially if you're in a susceptible group, if you're elderly, if you're immune compromised, that just makes sense. Stay home. Don't put yourself at risk. And then also, if you can sacrifice, even if it's going to cost you some to do it, but if you can shift in some way to work at home, just do it. And number three, no parties, no social gatherings for entertainment. That makes sense. Maybe even no public gatherings at all. If that big of a step is needed and we need to hold off on those kind of things, then so be it. Number four, be smart. Don't touch things in public. You absolutely don't have to. Heck, even wear gloves and masks if you're in an area that's hit hard. Number five, do the stuff we should have been doing anyway. Washing hands for 20 seconds in warm water. And by the way, be more like someone with OCD. Remember Monk? Be more like that and less like the guy in a hurry that barely even gets their hands wet. So lean on the OCD side when it comes to washing hands right now. And then six, when you do go to work, don't shake hands, don't hug folks right now, just for a little while until we get through this. If you gotta have that human touch, then go for the elbow bump at the most, and with sleeves on, hopefully, and no skin to skin. Anyway, look, these are just the common sense things that we can do. But let's stick with the common sense and not destroy our economy. Look, we're already going to have a world of hurt. It's already going to be incredibly difficult to pull ourselves out of this. But we can. We've been through tough times. Let's not make this an unprecedented tough time if it doesn't have to be. Stick with common sense. Stick with constitutional things that you can do, things that are already in your state statutes across the country, and don't go overboard. Let's look for some common sense. Hopefully the president will continue to bring us back to that. I think I sense that we're headed in that direction. And then if you're in a state that hasn't gone overboard, implore your governor to not do so. If you're in one of those crazy states where they have and they've shut everything down, then beg for some common sense to come back. I mean, we're going to talk more about the due process of this and how to respond to all this. I do think, and I said in that second video that we made in this series that, claims were going to be difficult for takings, but I said in that video, it depends on the time and it depends on the severity, and these states that are saying no one can go to work for anything, and if they and they're going to drag that out over time, I'm telling you, there are going to be claims for takings under that. This has gone beyond what is constitutional and what is authorized by state statute and what history has ever allowed us to do in this country. So let's bring this thing back to some common sense. Let's start pulling together. Let's look for ways to police ourselves. That's, I think that, my buddy Matt Krause, state rep right now, he made it very clear on our radio program, Wobblers Live, the other day, something that I think makes perfect sense. He said, the more we police ourselves, it's just like with anything else. The more moral we are, the more higher our values are, the less you need government in other situations as well as in this situation. So don't be foolish and go out there and put other people at risk, because that's the kind of thing that will lead to even rational governments shutting everything down. Let's not go there. Let's police ourselves. Let's keep our government in check and keep it constitutional, and we'll get through this. We'll get on the other side of it. All right, make sure you check out our website today. I want to encourage you to take our Constitution class while you are stuck at home. If you're unfortunate to be in one of those states where you can't go anywhere, then make the most of the time. We've got some great tools available to you, some other constitutional topics covered, and of course, become one of our Constitution hosts. We're doing a free special right now where you can host these classes online for free. Go to constitutioncoach.com. You can sign up for free as a Constitution host, and therefore get your friends and family online and share this video with them and other videos, but also dive into our entire Constitution class and make sure that you get educated on what your rights are and how to preserve them and how to pass them to the next generation. I'm Rick Green. This has been today's Constitutional Minute.